I was around 10 years old when I started to realize the weight of things that people were sharing with me. Adults sharing heavy but appropriate things about how and what they were feeling. And even though at sometimes I didn't fully understand or have perspective about what they were saying, all I needed to understand is what they were saying was important. So it was no surprise that I went on to college to study psychology, and then 5.5 years later found myself here in Washington, D.C. as a psychotherapist practicing substance abuse, mental health, and sex offender treatment. And it was in that space that I started to find my own catharsis. Up until that point, I thought that my issues, isolation and depression, were exclusively related to my relationship to my sexual identity. And it was in this space where I was working with young boys who most certainly were going to be young men and did everything that society expected of them, and who didn't have to deal with a lot of the pressures and the ills that I did, still had the same holes, still had the same needs and desires for healing. And what that taught me was that these issues, things that we lost, things that we lose as a child, they all find their ways into our lives. They may have a very unique delivery system, but they all serve and affect us some way, somehow, mentally, the same. So after 4 years of doing this kind of work, I realized that the individual, the one-on-one, the talking about issues as if they're only unique to us and us only, was not the impact I wanted. I needed a new job, a bigger job, with a larger platform, a broader outreach, and a bigger audience. The only thing I could think of was art. And at first, the art looked like storytelling. I wanted to share my own experiences growing up as a little black, gay, sissy boy, poor in the rural South, with the hopes that I could strike some empathy with my audiences and they can all see themselves in my art, no matter what the qualifiers were, that you could see the human condition and find yourself in my story. And after 7 years of that, I felt the need to do more. I had another push. There was something about the exploration of the humanity and the inhumanities that we all experience that I needed to focus on. And that brought me to performance art. It was that pale fall grass kind of color that covered this slight slope of a hill with the perfect evergreen tree line atop. This was the spot that I spent 2 weeks last fall looking for to shoot my body of work, and I found it in this small nook in Rock Creek Park. So I woke up very early the next morning. Even though I only wanted to shoot the work in the gloaming of that afternoon, I got up early to give myself space and also to give the universe space. Because as long as I've been doing this, I realized that anytime I do something, I have to give the universe space to fuck my process up. And with this particular project, there was an extraordinary opportunity for the universe to do that, because for this project, I needed to get under a 500-pound rock. So after spending half the morning trying to get this 600-pound rock out of my truck and onto this dolly, and I started to pull it up this hill, I realized that that slight slope of a hill had all of a sudden became a 90-degree vertical. But still, I pulled that rock up and I found the perfect spot within the perfect spot to shoot. And by this time, my then assistant Deirdre and my friend Tony had came and he was going to shoot it for me. And we were running out of light. And I said, all right, guys, let's do our test so we can get this done. Tony runs up the ladder. I get underneath this 900-pound rock. In case you hadn't noticed, the rock does gain weight throughout the story. I'm sorry, I'm from the South. Hyperbole is my first language. So now I'm underneath this 1,100-pound rock, and Tony's doing his test, and the time's clicking, and then I realize I got about 30 seconds before I have to get this rock off me, and Tony says, bam, I got it, we can go. Tony jumps off the rock, he jumps off the ladder, helps get me from underneath the rock, and I get up and I stand up, and bam, there he is, a U.S. Park police officer. He wants to know what we're doing. I tell him I'm an artist and I'm shooting this work, and he said, you have to pack this up, you need to go. And I said, well, I'll be honest with you, all I need to do is put on my clothes, it's going to take about a few more minutes, we'll be out of your hair. And he said, no, pack it up now. So we start to pack it up, and he stands there overseeing this process. And while he's doing that, I turn to him and I ask, how is it okay that these guys are over here shooting rockets and I can't shoot a photo? And he says to me, who's shooting rockets? Now, when he asked me that question, I knew exactly what I was up against. But still, I pointed out to him, less than 70 yards from where we were standing, a group of all white adults and their children over there shooting rockets, and not just bottle rockets, but model rockets, like 18 to 24 inches tall. And while we were sitting there talking, they shot off at least 6 of those rockets. But then he still asked me, who's shooting rockets? So he reluctantly meandered over to them, and he was out of earshot, but I could tell by his body language that he was just appeasing the situation. I stopped working. I could no longer suspend disbelief. I knew what was going to happen. And sure enough, 3 minutes later, after he was sitting in his cruiser, he drives his car up close to this family. He rolls down his window, puts his hands out, and gives them the thumbs up. And they jump up and down, screaming and happy they're about to shoot their rockets. But for me, that thumbs up was a call to action. I needed to respond to this. And I made my way towards this cruiser, and in between me and this cruiser was this group. And while I walked past them, one of them said, I think it's time that we pack up and leave now. And I get to his cruiser, and I asked him, how could this happen? And he said, well, there's no law that said that they can't shoot a rocket here. And I said, well, where's the law that says that I can't shoot a photograph? And he barks at me to go stand by my car. And there I wait for 5 minutes until he pulls up again and motions me to look at his laptop computer in his car and starts to cite these laws and talking about commercial photography. And I challenged that, and he got upset. He got out of the car, he got in my face, and he demanded to see my ID. At first I refused, and then he put his hand on his taser. And I asked him, are you going to taser me now? And then he calls for backup. And within a minute, 2 cruisers come screaming from either side of the park, tires screeching into the parking lot. His first partner gets out, and he's another white man, and they both jump in on me, telling me that they can arrest me. And I'm still challenging that because I've done nothing arrestable. And then their supervisor comes up. The sergeant on duty happens to be a black woman, and she corrals them, and they caucus for a minute. And then she comes over and talks to me, and the process starts with breaking down, talking about permits and things that I didn't need. And ultimately, I didn't get my shot that day. But that wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing for me was the process when I walked past those people, and one of them says, I think it's time that we leave now. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, thinking that maybe that was an act of solidarity on their point, but I thought it was wrong. And what that told me is that there needs to be some kind of language that allows people to participate in the process of others in ways that are informed and effective. Because if it was informed and effective, then they would have got to shoot their rockets, and I would have got to shoot my photography. And that experience prompted me at this time, in the highlight of Black Lives Matter and this new consciousness for this group of people who did not know what was happening in our communities, now have this knowledge. There's something that we should do beyond that. There's a way that you can engage this process. So I did a call for all white visual artists to submit work that spoke to the preservation and protection of Black lives as they understood it. And when I did that, the world came at me. And I knew that we didn't have the language necessary in order to make this happen. And from that, I found a friend of mine who was working on this technology that was taking people from online to offline to have important conversations about things that mattered to them. And figuring out that that was a way that we could then rethink the process of healing and stop thinking that it's a binary process where one fixes the other, but become a stronger process where the all fix the one. Thank you.